This podcast is brought to you by eBiz Radio, the place to go if you want to know about the world of business and the business of the world. For daily podcast and article uploads, go to eBizRadio.com or follow us on Twitter at eBizRadioGlobal. My name is Nick Snow, and joining me for an edition of eBizInsights is Brian Eager, founder and CEO of the Towerstone Leadership Center. Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to chat to me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. Of course, we're going to be discussing a little bit about yourself and Towerstone, but most importantly, the state of leadership in South Africa and how you as a company are really striving to improve it. So once again, thank you very much for joining me. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey that's led you to create Towerstone.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. And I do appreciate it. Answering the question, what's led me to create it in my background? Lucky enough, I guess in today's times, to have worked for two other companies besides the current company that I founded. The first, and both happen to be technical companies, technical IT companies. The one company, lucky enough to work my way through the organization, starting off as a technical manager all the way up to the group sales and marketing director. And my background in that particular space positioned me to understand the importance of providing a good service from a technical perspective, as well as, of course, when you're out in the front end dealing with clients, what it is that you're meant to be repairing and fixing up, you understand the importance of servicing the client, of course, in the manner that the client expects to be serviced.
Yes.
So that's the first. And then I moved to an organization where I was lucky enough to be positioned as the regional MD of that business. And of course, my background, understanding, coming from the first company, understanding the entire value chain of an organization, right from what it is that you sell to how we deliver it and how we ensure the client is happy. I was given the privilege of running this particular company called Unihold. And Unihold was then merged into Siemens Business Services, one of the businesses as part of the big Siemens group, and built that business, built it over the period of 7.5, 8 years. And then moved, while at the group, moved to Europe, and I spent just close on to 3 years as the person responsible for that same business for strategy, sales, portfolio, and marketing. And what that gave me as insight was to operate from a center, from a shared services environment out into 58 countries, working with the various country managers, and that's getting the country managers to understand the value of what the center, head office, provides, and of course how head office can better service and better provide the businesses that are out of the coalface. So I guess just the background, having got involved in management, moved myself up through the organization quite quickly. By understanding the value chain within an organization. And then that second company, the Unihold, which became Siemens, got to take what I learned and really help the business grow, which of course got me to be appointed and positioned in Europe.
A very interesting round of experience, of course, that got you to where you are. So I imagine from that point you were like, well, now I've learned all I can learn. How do I now apply this, and how do I create something to embrace this knowledge that I have?
Well, one of the things when I left Europe and I came back to South Africa, there's not a barrier in your path, but you come to a fork, and the fork says, I can go back to corporate, I can make the call to go back to the corporate world, and I was lucky enough to be offered some really nice positions. And then it was, well, why don't I give this thing a try? And when I sat at my desk and thought about what it is that I'm going to do, I looked at a flip chart, and the flip chart spoke the following to me. First, it was blank, so it didn't say a whole lot to me. But how things then evolved was I focused on what I did at Siemens and what I did running the two businesses, and Siemens being Siemens in Europe. The two businesses and Siemens in Europe was help people understand the value of a goal, of a vision. What does the company stand for? What's the company's purpose? And if I can help the organizations that I've worked with and worked for and get them to have the necessary clarity around that, and then link people within the organization to support the leadership teams to drive for that purpose, to help that purpose manifest and realize, then ultimately it could be quite simple, and that is link people to the organization's purpose and getting them to truly understand the value that they can contribute to the business. And that's how Towerstone was formed. It was formed on the basis of how do we get people to understand the value of their contribution into an organization. More importantly, how do we help the leadership understand the value that their team members can be contributing to the greater good of the organization if those leaders helped and guided them by making sure that they all understood the big picture, whether it was the purpose, the goals, the vision, or the strategy of the organization. And that's how we formed Towerstone.
Now, of course, your bio on the Towerstone website says that you went from being voted as the naughtiest kid and most likely to fail at school, and you found massive success, of course, in the information and technology sector, as you've mentioned. Does this have a lot to do with really looking into one's own potential and trying to create the circumstances that will unleash that potential? Because I think the major challenge of today's leaders is how do we encourage people to see the greatness within themselves and get that idea to click within them to show them how powerful they truly can become?
A really good question. It begs the question that I'm often asked, and that is, are leaders born? So are we born with that innate ability, or is there an opportunity to learn, evolve, and groom yourself as a leader? And I think both are true. I think we're not born as leaders. I think we're born with the ability to connect with people. So we've got some of the folk some leaders that are extroverts, that have the ability to connect and have fun with people. I think they've got an advantage, but that doesn't mean that those that are not born with that ability don't have the ability to lead. And if you look at the book Good to Great that Jim Collins wrote, and he published it, I think 6 or 8 years ago, he did a case study on 11 companies that were able to manage and move and sustain themselves from the startup as a good company and then break to and become a great company. And those 11 leaders, of the 11 leaders, one of the leaders was an extrovert, an outgoing gent, Lee Iacocca of General Motors. But the other 10 leaders were leaders that were quiet, reserved, strong resolve, more introverted, and were quite comfortable to take a backseat in running the company, allowing others to kind of be the platform or have the platform to talk from and talk about the company. So, you've got this view that are we born, or can we learn? Can we learn to lead?
Yes.
I guess how I evolved was, the ability to connect with people. So I had that ability to connect with people, but I had to learn. I had to learn to understand what it means to connect people to an organization's purpose. And I had to take the time, and I had to invest in myself. So there was a lot of work that I did in myself with regards to how to just get people to, one, remain connected to me, but more importantly, get them to see the picture and stay connected with the picture that we're operating towards, so whether it was the vision or the purpose. So it's no longer important for me that they connect to me, but they connect to the organization's purpose. So that's what I really had to work on.
Now, of course, being a sales leader myself in the company that I work for, various people underneath me, it's my responsibility to make sure I encourage that corporate culture and that customer centricity to really connect with the clients at all points to make sure they are receiving the best of what we have to offer. Now, tell me about Towerstone's vision and how you are aiming to achieve that, and how, when you go into a business, you try and change the organizational thinking to drive people towards creating a brand that is powerful, that draws in customers and will retain them.
Well, if you look at an organization, and maybe best to look at an organization that's a really good brand out there, and one can look at Google, one can look at Apple as examples. The people that work for Google or an Apple, and forgive the cliche, because everybody knows and talks about them, but people work for those organizations not because of the organization. They in fact do the work within those organizations because they love what they do. So they could actually work in any organization. The fact is those two organizations provide them an awesome vehicle to work within so that they can fulfill themselves. They can achieve what they want to achieve. So when they get up in the morning, they want to go to work and they want to do the very best that they can do. And if you look at what Towerstone does and what I advocate is with all the leader teams, I talk about the importance of fulfillment. And fulfillment in the workplace is not something that is easily, it's not something that's easily found. More often not, it's a grind. People look at it and they will go to work and get the paycheck. But when you look at it through a lens where we need to be looking at how do we create and encourage fulfillment in the workplace, you start by asking the leaders themselves, how fulfilled are they as leaders within the work environment? And if we can help the leaders themselves find greater fulfillment, not through their functional competence or knowing how to do the job, but really working to get the best out of people, if we can work with them and help them find better ways to get the best out of their people, it means that they'll be more fulfilled, they'll be happier, they'll be more comfortable. As opposed to just sitting over their people and micromanaging them, they'll be comfortable saying with themselves that my people know why they're here. They know what they've got to do, and I'm comfortable with giving them the necessary free rein, of course, in a controlled environment or within a structure, because I've empowered them as best as possible. So leaders that we work with in a way that the question right at the outset is, so how do we help you find fulfillment? And if we can help you find fulfillment, then it helps you encourage your teams and the folk that sit in those teams to find greater fulfillment. Because at the end of the day, when we do come to work, we do want to work. We do want to build something. We want to achieve something. We want to be recognized. But to work in an environment where you're not fulfilled, you don't enjoy what you're doing, it becomes a grind. It's quite interesting. Clayton Christensen writes a brilliant piece of literature called How Will You Measure Your Life? And he asks three very important questions. One of the questions that he asks is your personal relationships and how fulfilling are your personal relationships. The second question he talks to is how fulfilled are you at work? So do you enjoy what you do? And he makes the point that if you don't enjoy the work that you do, then if you have a bad day at work and you are not in the position to, or you're not comfortable with the work you're doing, then your bad day becomes a disastrous day. A typical day on average will just be a normal day. But he says if you love what you do, if you're passionate about what you do, then there is never a bad day. There are only okay days, but never bad, because you love what you do, every day is a great day. So as an example, and I use the literature that I read, is I encourage that conversation and the dialogue with the leaders that I work with to say, what does fulfillment look like for you? And if fulfillment looks like this for you, and you're not fulfilled, how can I help you get there? And remember, the more fulfilled you are, the more fulfilled your team members will be.
I definitely agree with you there, because your fulfillment will be infectious. And if you are someone that they are looking up to for guidance and for leadership, then they will start to receive that from you, which I think is going to be a wonderful gift that you, of course, can give them. Now, as we draw towards the end, I just want to touch very quickly, of course, on South Africa's leadership position. We are in a very I'd say uneasy predicament where, of course, there is quite a lot of instability within our country. There's a lot of potential, but there is also that instability. And often the leaders who we hope that we could look up to are letting us down. So how do you at Towerstone envision changing South Africa? And what do you think we need to do to change the leadership position in South Africa so that we truly can create a great country with great businesses that create great leaders?
So I think if you look at it from two perspectives, one, private sector, and two, government. And government could be quasi or it could be parastatal. But if you look at it from just from a private sector perspective, leadership in South Africa, in fact, is pretty good. In fact, I think it's very good. If you look at examples of Discovery and Adrian Gore, if you look at Brian Jockey at Bidvest, if you look at organizations like PEP or PEP for Christo Vissa, we've got fantastic business leaders that have built empires that are great examples, not only in South Africa, but are examples to any other company leader in the world. So we've got some really good private sector leaders. And I think what is important is, I don't think there is a case to be said, is there a bad leader or a good leader? Because who's ever being led, that person will look at who's leading them, will look at them through a set of lenses. So if I think somebody's a bad leader, somebody else who reports to the person might think that particular person is a good leader. So to determine if somebody's a good or bad leader, obviously it's based on the person who's being led. That being said, if you look at the government and look at some of the challenges and the sensationalism, and you look at what's in the paper at the moment, yeah, I think we are challenged. I think we are very challenged at the moment. But I also think that there's lots of good that doesn't make the press. There's lots of good that's not out in the public domain, where there are really good leaders working really hard behind the scenes to just fulfill on what they're doing to make sure that the services that are being rendered to South Africans are being rendered. Of course, that excludes Eskom at the moment, maybe excludes one or two others. However, for the most part, I think there is some good work. I guess the point is, if you look at our leader of the country, you look at him as an example. I don't know if he's a great example. I want to be very politically correct when I say this, but I don't know if he's a great example, and I guess certain portions of the public will be very comfortable with him. But for the most part, I think people that I surround myself with in the business arena think that he's not a great example. But I think it's damn difficult to be a leader of a country. Yes. And I think none of us actually have been in that position. I don't think any of us can actually really comment because we've never been in that position. But the way he positions himself and the way the press position him, I don't think he's doing a really great job just in terms of how he lands with us and how he shows up in the public domain.
Of course. But I think I like the point that you do see a lot of potential within South Africa, and our tendency to paint everyone with the same brush is clearly way too high, and that there is a lot of potential, and we just need to put the right people in the right positions, whether it be within the economic sector, the private sector, the parastatal sector, whatever sector it may be. We need to not be afraid to put the right people in the right positions. But now, finally, before I let you go, please do let me know how people can get in touch with you at Towerstone and how they can, of course, take their brand to the next level.
So you can contact me directly on my email address, which is brian.eager at towerstone-global.com, or you can contact my offices in Cape Town on +27 21 975 0311, and my team will deal or put them through to me so we can have the necessary conversations.
That's wonderful, and I definitely encourage the next generation of leaders who are listening to this podcast to get in touch with Towerstone to really make that change. And on that note, it brings us to the end of this edition of eBizInsights. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure to be chatting to you. Thank you for joining me here on eBiz Radio.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.